So tell me, man, what was your initial thought when you saw? Well, first of all, let me preface everything with this. Me and this man have been friends for shit, for 10 years now, 15 years now. I mean, we go back like like Methuselah and them. We go back a long ways. So, and you're obviously an officer of the law in Rockford, and you've been doing that what 6 years now?
No, man, it's been since 2008.
Wow,
So
it's almost 10. Wow.
it flies when you really sit down and think about it. You're like, man, it's been that long. But
Yeah, that's crazy. But I mean, you're doing well. I mean, you've been at it forever, and you ain't. I mean, I know you had some close calls, but you're healthy and safe. So I mean, that says a lot right there.
right about that.
so 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 back to my original question. Tell me what you was thinking when you saw. Well, first let's start with the Dallas situation. Five cops. I mean, I think four cops were killed, 13 or so were injured. I mean, what was your thoughts when you? It's supposed to be a peaceful protest, and something like that happens.
Honestly, I kind of saw it building for a while. I'm surprised that it happened when it did. I would have assumed something like that would happen, beforehand. I mean, honestly, when you sometimes you look on Facebook, and granted it's Facebook, people might say stuff they don't mean, but a lot of
Right.
hatred out there towards cops, and a lot of we'll say advocating of violence towards cops on Facebook, and I've even had some of these discussions with family members, and it's the same thing, man. They advocate violence, in a situation like that, and so like I said, man, I was surprised that it took as long as it did.
Now I'm gonna say I got a follow up question for that, but I would say I was talking with my boss, who's is a great dude. He's an older white guy, and you know, it's funny because people don't even know what to say about it. Especially when you talk about the murderings of or excuse me, the murders of Philando Castile and Sterling. They don't even know what to say about it. My thing about the police brutality and the police murders are like the black community is so fed up. I don't know if we know what else to do. But there's no excuse for killing an innocent person. I mean, actually, in my life, I would say I've met more great cops than I've met, and I met some scumbag cops. I mean, you remember that situation in Stone Park. I mean, I've dealt with some truly scumbag cops too. But just knowing you and some of the guys I've come in contact with, there's some wonderful people out there as officers of the law, and it's disgusting that it's come to that. How does that make you feel as an officer seeing that happen? I mean, obviously you're already fearful, or maybe not fearful, but just hyper aware doing your job as it is. How does it make you feel as far as your safety when you see something like that happen?
Well, I've always said this, and I've said this a lot to some of my coworkers, man, and they never really. I think a lot of them don't really understand what I'm saying. There's no guarantee safety in doing the job. You know, I think it's easier for maybe people or black people to understand that. And there's some people that don't like you because you're a police officer. And when you find yourself in some of these neighborhoods, some of these places, like, if they wanted to get you, they could. So
Yeah.
you wear the uniform, like there ain't no guarantee in the safety.
I think it makes you more of a target sometimes. I mean, I would imagine, because it's like I was telling an analogy with my wife the other day. I'm like, it's getting to the point now where if two people are shooting at each other and the police show up, they may turn and shoot at the police together. And I'm starting to feel like that's the direction that
It
this
just
kind of
happened.
stuff is headed in. Anyway, yeah, I kind of feel like it could even make you a target at this point. Like, you become the almost uniter of bad things. You walk in and people are looking at you funny when you're supposed to be there to help and uphold the law. And that's not, and obviously it's not your fault. I mean, I know you for a long time. I doubt you would do anything to anybody that wasn't above board. Um,
Yeah.
so now let's go into Alton and Philando. Is a black man with a family, and not only biracial children, but a black daughter, a full black daughter. I mean, what are your thoughts um, as far as those situations go?
Well, I mean, okay, the Philano situation, I'm not really sure all of what happened, because I don't know if it's been released or I'm not really sure all of what happened, but this is what I'll say. If if he shot him just because he was afraid, and the fact that the guy had a gun, nah, man, you can't be doing that. You know, if he's legally um, possessing a gun. He's not breaking the law, not putting anyone's life in danger. You know, you can't just shoot him. You know what I mean? You can't just shoot him. It has to be a reason behind it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, he fired into the car, and the man's child was in the back seat. So, I'll be straight up with you, man. That brought me to straight tears, because I'm thinking like, look, I got a family. What if I was murdered in front of my family? I mean, the type of mental anguish that you put on a child, and you put on, this woman for the rest of her life. I mean, you're not talking about something that's going to go away in 2 years. I mean, obviously, my dad died at a young age, so not only can I relate to losing a father, but not like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it was bad enough having my pops pass, but if my pops had been murdered, we talk about Alton Sterling. I don't know if you saw the press conference where his son was up at the podium, and his wife, and this seeing that the son break down, man, like that caused some feelings in me. I don't know if I've ever felt before, just because it was so horrifying, and it took me back to my experience. But then I had to think about, not only that, like, he was killed. It wasn't just some natural thing that happened. It wasn't just a natural tragedy. It was a murder. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you saw, I think it's Paul Rosenberg out of New York on Hot 97, yeah, one of the stations in New York. Awesome. Did you see his rant to the officer he was talking to, and saying that you can never say it's a bad job? What would you say about those officers' performance? I mean, I do understand that there's kind of a fraternity a little bit. Like, you're not going to just say the cop's an idiot, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, like, do you think they did a good job?
You froze.
Oh, I was saying the Paul Rosenberg thing where he was talking to the police officer from New York, and the officer couldn't bring himself to say that the cops had done a bad job. And then I went on to say that, go ahead.
This is what I'm going to say. We as police, we understand this very well. And then the average person doesn't understand this. But, you and I might walk into a room, and from our different perspectives, our different viewpoints, might cause us to act differently. You understand what I'm saying? Right. So if I walk into a room and I see something that I don't like, and I perceive it to be a threat, I might turn and run out of the room, we'll say, where you stay. Does that mean that I'm wrong for running or you're wrong for staying? No, we got different viewpoints. So, in the world of law enforcement, I may not see something that you saw. When you look at the case law that basically governs use of force and things like that, it takes into perspective the officer's viewpoint and what he knew at the time. So, looking at any situation, without really having a complete understanding of what it is, like you without throwing yourself underneath the bus, you can't really say one way or the other. You know what I mean? And know everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is funny because this woman, I think her name was Nakia Jackson or Nakia Johnson. Did you see her rant about? It gained a lot of press on social media. But basically, she was saying, what they did was wrong, and she was saying what they did was horrible. And I understand where you're coming from too, because I think a lot of officers have been in situations where they could have made a mistake, and maybe they didn't, thank God, but they could have.
Yeah.
Now, my problem is it's always the same situation where there's a white cop shooting a young black teen or a young black person, between ages 12 to 38. That's where I kind of say, okay, well, how come this doesn't happen? I mean, and granted, I think you can answer this. I think Caucasian males make up more of the police force than any other race. I think that's fairly obvious. But it seems like that's always the situation. I mean, I haven't heard about anything where a Mexican dude, shot a Mexican kid and shouldn't have. And I'm sure it's happened. You just don't see the press on it. So that's where my problem is. But I do feel like that Rosenberg rant specifically on the radio station was a little unfair because
it was very unfair.
Yeah, and he was using it to be sensationalist, and that's why it got so much publicity, because he was trying to be sensational, and I don't think that's fair either. Because that cop, like you were saying, understands that there's different vantage points, and I've never been a cop, but I know approaching the situation, and I've also noticed that when these guys are killed, unfortunately, they always do have firearms.
Yeah.
That's what I've seen lately too. And
We'll bring up the Sterling situation. Now, I watched both videos. One video was, the quality was kind of terrible. Honestly, you couldn't really see too much. Maybe it would you could view it more clearly on the cell phone. But then the second video, maybe I think this is the one that the store owner took. You could see that Sterling is moving his shoulder. To me, which would indicate that he's moving his arm, his right arm. We'll say. Now, what was he doing with that right arm? You couldn't see. Was he going towards his pocket? Was he, who knows? Who knows what he was doing? But if he was going towards his pocket, then would that change the game a little bit?
Well, why 6 shots? And y'all have tasers, right?
Well, I think in his case, he was tased. It didn't work.
Okay.
He was tased before they tackled him to the ground. And so I guess the taser didn't work. They went hands on. And so now they're on the ground wrestling with him. I think if you took this is what you got to do. If you took his race out of the equation, right? Let's pretend that everybody in the situation was, I don't know, Asian, right? Okay. So you got an Asian guy who's being approached by 2 Asian police officers, and I think I want to say the call was someone called and said that somebody pointed a gun at somebody and say he matched.
I read that it was a homeless man. And I guess he was asking the dude for some money or something, and he pulled his gun on him, and he called the police. That's what I read. I don't know if it's the truth or not.
In all reality, it could have been that. It could have been. It could have been a situation where a homeless man called, or whoever. But they say, hey, this person has a gun. They pointed. Let's look at this. Hey, so and so has a gun. He pointed it at me, right? So you're the police officer responding to the scene. You see the person that matched the description. He could be the guy, or he could be someone that looks similar to him. So you begin to talk to this person and you give him commands to do something, right? To make you a little bit safer so that you can do your job. And he basically refuses your commands. Would you, now think maybe a little bit more that maybe this is the person that has the gun that pointed it at whoever? All right. Yeah. Then you go to tase him. It doesn't work, but he's not listening. So you go to tackle him to the ground. You tackle him to the ground and then he starts reaching towards his pocket. Would you think that perhaps there's a gun in his pocket, considering that, hey, he matches the description and he ain't listening to what I'm asking him to do?
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, I think, go ahead.
Let's just say this. So,
okay,
let's say his hand goes into his pocket. Would you, and you think at this point that he's the person that has the gun and that the gun is potentially in his pocket? So his hand goes into his pocket. What do you think that he's going to do next?
Right. He's probably going to try to harm me with whatever he has. Yeah.
Oh, and at the end of the day, if you felt that someone was about to kill you, how would you react?
Right. So let me ask you this. Have you been in that situation?
I've been in several situations where, I've encountered people with guns. Either in their hand or on their person. And so I'll give you an example.
Hey, do me a favor. Try to hold the camera steady if you can. Yeah. You like you having a seizure, dog.
I move when I talk. So one night I was working and they put out a description of a person with a gun. During this time frame, there was no concealed carry in Illinois. So if you're walking down the street with a gun, you're in the wrong, right? So this guy's walking in the area with a gun. Someone called, said he had a gun. Gave a pretty decent description of him. So I drive and I see to the area and I see the guy that completely matched the description. When he sees me, he runs into a house. So, I radio it in. And one of the officers who was in the area was like, well, go around to the back of the house to see if he runs out of the back. So I go around to the back of the house. The door flies open. Multiple people run out of this house. One of the people that ran was the guy that I just saw that matched the description. He ran out of the back of the house, ended up tackling him to the ground. When I tackled him onto the ground, the first thing that he did was reach into his pocket, right? That's where his hand went. Now, he was like 17 years old, right? Young black kid. And I never dealt with him before. But I was bigger than him. I was stronger than him. So I knew that he ain't going to be able to get his hand into his pocket. And if he is, he ain't going to be able to pull this gun out. Right? So sat on top of him, was able to overpower him, put him in the handcuffs, man, stand him up, and into that pocket that he reached into was the gun. Now, here's the whole thing. Was he trying to shoot me with the gun, or was he scared and he was going to throw it away? I don't know. But because I had the advantage, I didn't have to go to grabbing my gun. And honestly, I wouldn't have wanted to do that, because if I wanted to go grab my gun, then that would make me give up my hands, really, because now I can't control him, because now my hands are on my gun.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's a two-part thing. It sounds like, number one, it has a lot to do with in some situations, not all situations, because Philando Castile's situation, he's sitting in his car. But, I mean, if he goes in the pocket real quick, he could be reaching for a gun, and that's your point. And two, it sounds like the physical aspect has a lot to do with it, because Alton Sterling was bigger than these cops. I mean, he was. I mean, you could tell he was physically imposing on these cops. I don't think – but so here's my next question for you. Why 6 shots? Why – I mean, I get he's a big dude, so maybe you got to shoot him twice, right? But do you think is that a psychological thing, that once you start shooting, you're scared and you just keep shooting? I mean, as far as training goes, why do you think somebody would fire 6 shots into a person as opposed to 1 or 2?
Well, I think in the video, and listen, I could be wrong about this Alton Sterling thing, but I think in the video there were 2, we'll say, volley of shots. So maybe the first few shots was because, he did whatever he did. And then the second volley was maybe because he continued to do whatever that he was doing to put these officers in danger. I don't know. I mean, 6 shots does seem a bit excessive, but I will say this. Just because you shoot somebody once doesn't mean that they're dead or they're going to stop doing what they're doing.
That's true.
I know an officer who happened to be in a shooting, and he ends up shooting a guy who has a rifle. He ends up shooting the guy in the leg. You know what the guy did? He ran, but he was still holding a rifle. How easy would it have been for this guy to shoot as he was running? So just because, when you shoot somebody, the goal is you use deadly force until they stop doing what they're doing. The situation in the whole beginning. So if shooting them once doesn't do it, then you got to do it again. You know what I mean? Or you got to do something. Hell, even if you run, you got to do something. Otherwise,
right. Now, let me pose this question to you. As far as the training you've received being an officer, do you think that there could be a universal training to reduce the amount of force used? Do you feel like, I mean, because like I said, I don't know this, and I think the general public doesn't know what's appropriate, because like you said, we've never been in these situations. I've never tackled a dude who's reaching for a gun. I can't honestly look you in the eye and say I wouldn't do something wrong in that situation. And I think the outrage that all of America feels is partly because of the length of these videos. You're only seeing 30-second clips, to your point. Now, I'm not saying it makes it right, because truthfully, I don't feel like either of those men should be dead today. I really don't. And I feel like, depending on the officer, they may not be. But at the same time, I don't know, is there maybe a de-escalation training? Do you guys have escalation training in your precinct? Or tell me, like, is there anything that can be done there from your perspective? Because I don't know. The general public doesn't know, and that's why you're the best person I know to talk to about it.
I would say generally, no. I mean, how do you de-escalate a situation where someone's reaching for a gun? How? I don't know. How do you de-escalate a situation where someone's just so upset and irate that it doesn't matter what you say to them, they're going to do what they're going to do? I think probably a lot of that depends upon the individual. So if I'm an individual who is better at talking people down, I'm going to be better at talking people down. And I can teach you a class on me, but you can't be me. You can only be you. Right. So
right.
A lot of it comes down to the individual, and just being able to talk to them. Now, I'll say this. Let's say if you're dealing with somebody that would it be easier to talk them down? I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. But, well, let me say this. So what about psychological evaluations? Because the reason I know you're probably a good cop, because I know your demeanor, and I know how you handle your own life and how you are around people. I mean, you're a jovial dude for the most part, happy. You'll take care of people, do what you got to do for them. And that's why I think it's a great thing that you became a police officer, because your personality and the way you live your life matches what I think police officers should stand for. Now, as far as when you were going into the forest, do you think that the psychological profiles and things like that they did? Because I remember when you were going on, you had to get a bunch of people to vouch for you. You had to do a ton of different stuff. Do you think there's more that can be done on that end to select the right candidates?
Probably not. I mean, here's why. Two things. A, one, a person can lie. One, you can lie. Two, the job, depending upon the things that you see and you go through, has the ability to kind of, we'll say, change you.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the biggest part. Yeah.
So, if we're gonna keep it all the way honest, it has the ability to change you. And, so maybe that's the bigger thing to focus on is that, how do you prevent that from happening? To be honest with you, I don't know how you can. I mean,
maybe continually getting psychological evaluations. I think it would be one thing.
Well, let's just say if you did that and you did these psychological evaluations and determined that half of the people, needed help before they could continue. So you flush them out, you bring in some new people. The bottom line is that, it's psychologically damaging to see, we'll say a kid who's been killed, that's murdered right in front of you. He's like the same age as your son. Or to see someone laying in the street who's in a car accident and half their face is smashed in. Or, some other type of gruesome, you know what I mean? Or to deal with the people that have been victimized and hear their story and feel their pain. Like there's nothing as a human being that you could do to be ready for that unless you've experienced that your whole life. Well,
here's the question. Here's a question for you. How is it? I mean, it doesn't seem to have changed you. You're still as goofy as you've been, since we were sitting on lunch tables at high school. So tell me how you've prevented it from letting it seep into your life and becoming. I mean, who knows? You could be a monster. I don't know. But what I can tell is that you're not.
I mean, sometimes for me talking about it, man, and honestly, maybe I'm just burying it. I don't know. Maybe I bury it somewhere inside of my body. I don't know. But talking about it makes it better for me. Like, I'm not one of these guys where, like, let's say if I was to drink because of it, like, if drinking wouldn't make me feel better about it.
Right.
That's not even an option for me. I just talk about it. I mean, that's the only thing that you could, for me, that helps, even me out about it is talking about it. Yeah. Letting your emotions flow a little bit.
Would you say a lot of the officers don't talk about it?
I think that, in the profession, maybe more so, a few years ago than now, because now it's getting better. But I think in the profession, it was almost like a profession of hardened, brutes, really. You couldn't really show any type of physical weakness or emotional weakness or, anything like that. So, you just put on this front. And I think that, and that all comes down to personality too. We went to high school with these guys who were maybe a little over masculine, and you probably in your head never thought that they cried, but in all reality, they probably wouldn't cried at night,
Yeah.
Some teddy bear, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
That's what I mean. So some of these guys are in the field of law enforcement, man, and they try to be, over masculine, and it's just like, that's not reality.
The general public doesn't understand what y'all go through. And you're right. I'm seeing a lot more kill police and this and that stuff, and that's not the answer. But I think part of the problem is the public doesn't know the other side of it. Because I can guarantee you not everybody that's killed an innocent black person is a terrible human being or a racist human being. I think there are some genuine mistakes that get made. Now, the one thing I will say is that I feel like they handle it wrong. I feel like it's handled horribly by the precincts, by the captains. But I feel like instead of coming out and saying, hey, we fucked up.
Yeah,
it's okay. I mean, it's not okay because somebody's dead, but I think the public would be able to swallow it a lot better if a mistake is admitted. But what happens is, is no indictment. Oh, well, whatever. And that's my problem with it. Because, if I've known you for a long time, if you went out tomorrow and you killed somebody, I know you, and I would say, you know what, he probably messed up. That's it. You know what I mean? It was probably a situation that something went sideways and there was a mistake made, and that happens in life. But why do you think that they go out of their way to make it seem like it's not their fault?
What do you mean, the department or the officer or what?
All of them combined, because it always seems like it's no wrongdoing was found. Like clearly some wrongdoing was found. Some happened that shouldn't have happened. So something had to happen that didn't happen the right way.
I think that there's probably a lot of parts to the question that you just asked. On the one hand, probably departments usually won't say anything unless there's a political motivation to it. So we'll say, for instance, let's say if the mayor goes to the police chief and says, "Hey, say this," then they'll say it. Especially if it's in one of these places where the mayor hires the police chief, he ain't gonna say or do nothing, without the blessing or an approval of the mayor. Now,
Okay,
your sheriff,
that's
for instance, the sheriff is an elected position. He might think about his constituents before he makes a statement, or he might just say, well, hey, guess what? It's safer if I don't say nothing and we just let the justice system take its course. Then that way we can't be blamed one way or the other, because the justice system hangs them out to dry. It's like, well, we didn't put our foot in our mouth by saying did the right thing. If the justice system, says that he didn't do anything wrong, then, hey, we didn't put our foot in our mouth by saying the wrong thing. Hey, it's up to the court system to figure it out. We're going to withhold judgment. We're not going to say nothing. We'll let the court system fill it out. I mean, it's a convenient way out, but then at the same time, as a department head, would you want to put your foot in your mouth and be like, well, he fucked up, and then it turns out he didn't, or hey, he did everything right, and then it turns out he fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's one of them things where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Last question for you is, how do you feel right now as a black police officer in America?
I feel like on the one hand, you have some black people that look at you and they say, good, hey, we need more of y'all. And then on the other hand, you got black people that's like, I don't like police. I don't care who's in the uniform, so it's kind of like which was funny, man. There was this girl, and I don't remember her name, but she was like a college student, and I participated in this this forum, and there was like me, there was a state's attorney, there was like some other I don't know, criminal attorney. There was a bunch of us. We were all minorities, so it was like a minority symposium, we'll say.
Gotcha.
And she hits me with this question like, oh, how do you feel being a black person, and seeing, all of this, corruptness towards black people by white cops? Like she basically threw me underneath the bus with the question she asked.
Yeah. She put you in a real bad spot.
Hey, because you're black, you see a lot of racism towards black people. Basically like, hey, all cops are bad. And I explained like, dude, I haven't seen nothing like that. You know what I mean? Like, really? Like, ain't nobody gonna sit up here and do that type of shit in front of me. Like, if someone's out there bogus like that, being racist, they ain't doing it in front of people because you know what? They don't know if the next guy's cool with it. You know what I'm saying? It's like some solo, in a dark alley shit where, ain't nobody there to call them on it. But I talked to her after the question and she basically was like, man, all cops are bad. And then fast forward a couple years, man, and she in a situation where she really could have been, screwed over, like in terms of like tickets and stuff. And guess who happened to be the person, there? You know what I mean? So, yeah, remember all that shit you said?
Yeah.
But that wasn't me, man. I cut her a break.
Yeah.
Cut her a break. Like, that's the type of person that I am. Like, so.
Well, yeah. And that's why I said it's a good thing that you are a cop. And it's a good, and see, if you had the kind of personality like that, you'd have easily said, nah, hell no. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think, like I said, I appreciate the work you're doing, man. I'm glad you're in the position you're in. And I think you're right, man. I'll be 100% honest with you. I don't have the balls to get out there and do what you do. I don't. I'm not even gonna try to pretend I do. I don't think I'm a weak person by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't have the guts for that. And I appreciate your perspective, brother. And I think that you should try to share it with as many people as that'll listen, because, like I said, the horrible part is I personally feel like all of these things that happen, I'm not saying they're uncommon, but I in my heart of hearts, I don't believe that is how the majority of our police force in this country is. I don't want to believe that. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe I just don't want to believe it. But I don't believe it because I've experienced both sides, and I would say I've had a lot more good cops in my life than bad cops. So like I said, man, I appreciate your time, and I'm gonna post this probably as soon as we get offline here, because I think it's really good for people to hear the perspective of somebody who does it every day. Big homie, be safe out there. And like I said, give me a call later. We'll link up about the trip.
All right, man. You take it easy.
All right, family. Salute. See ya.
See you.